The Galactic Council Chamber was a place of power and pride, a vast hall carved from an asteroid so ancient that its surface bore the scars of forgotten wars, and inside its towering walls banners of countless empires hung side by side, their colors shimmering under the glow of crystal lights. On this day the chamber was filled with laughter, sharp and mocking, as young alien cadets whispered and jeered at the mention of a word almost erased from history: humans. One cadet, bold yet naive, asked his mentor if the stories were true, if there really had once been a race from a hostile world who fought with unmatched fury. The mentor, an elder with scaled skin and 4 cold eyes, dismissed the question with a wave of his hand, his voice carrying over the crowd as he declared that humans were nothing more than fairy tales, ancient lies crafted to frighten children and to inspire soldiers in darker times. Their world, Earth, was destroyed long ago, he said, his tone heavy with arrogance. And their kind has been dust for centuries. Humans are myths, nothing more. The cadets laughed louder, some mimicking the word myths like it was a joke, but in the far corners of the chamber not all shared in the laughter. Some of the oldest races, whose bloodlines stretched back further than the council itself, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They remembered the stories their ancestors had whispered in private, stories of warriors who fought until their bodies broke, who burned brighter than the stars themselves in their defiance. Tales of human fleets that did not retreat, soldiers who did not surrender, and weapons that turned entire invasions to ash. Those stories had been buried by the council, sealed away in archives that few could access, but whispers had a way of surviving, passed in hushed tones, written in forgotten scrolls, and carried by the memory of those who knew the truth. Beyond the chamber, far from the arrogance of the council, strange things were happening in the void. On the edge of the galaxy, patrol ships intercepted signals that should not exist, signals faint but deliberate, repeating in patterns too precise to be random. At first the scouts thought it was interference, the ghostly echo of dying stars or malfunctioning probes drifting in darkness. But when the pattern returned again and again, their unease grew. One scout captain, his mandibles clicking nervously, recorded the sequence and whispered to his crew, "This is not static, this is language." The message, when decrypted, was incomplete, fragmented, as though torn by distance, yet within the distortion a single phrase could be made out. A phrase no alien had spoken in living memory: terror. The report was rushed to the council, and the chamber that once rang with laughter now trembled with murmurs. Some rulers scoffed, calling it a trick of nature or sabotage by rival empires, yet others fell silent, the color draining from their faces as they remembered the forbidden name. Terror. Earth. The death world. For centuries they had told themselves humanity was gone, burned away with their cursed planet, but now the void whispered otherwise. Arguments erupted in the chamber, voices colliding like storms. Some demanded the signals be ignored, insisting that feeding into myths would weaken the authority of the council. Others demanded investigation, warning that if the old legends held even a grain of truth, then the galaxy was not as safe as they believed. A frail elder, his voice shaking, whispered words that silenced the hall. "If the humans return, no fleet will save us." Outside the chamber, far away in the dark, the signals grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat across the stars, a heartbeat that should have been silent for centuries. The cadets who had once laughed now stared wide-eyed at the data feeds, their youthful arrogance replaced by the chill of fear. Because in the rhythm of the signals there was something undeniable, something alive, and though they could not yet see them, the galaxy felt the shadow of ships stirring beyond the void, ships that bore the mark of a legend they had tried so hard to erase. The council chamber still echoed with arguments when the explorers' report arrived, their voices desperate and broken as static consumed the last of their transmission. And in that garbled cry the entire hall froze, for what the crew had sent. Before silence was not a scream of battle but the sound of something vast moving through the void. The explorers had been dispatched to the coordinates found in the hidden archive, a derelict station left adrift near the husk of a collapsed star, and what they found there was not ruins but knowledge too dangerous to ignore. The archive had been built by a forgotten race, a place of storage carved into the remains of a broken moon, and its walls were lined with records of wars long past, battles that spoke of humans not as myths but as enemies that terrified even empires now extinct. Files described fleets of black steel that fought without retreat, commanders who sacrificed entire systems just to deny their enemies victory, and soldiers whose eyes glowed with defiance even in death. The young officers sent to investigate laughed nervously as they opened the files, claiming them to be fabrications, propaganda from dead civilizations. But when they discovered the coordinates hidden within the final logs, their laughter died. The coordinates pointed not to empty space but to a region forbidden, a sector sealed off by the Council long ago under the excuse of radiation storms. And the deeper the explorers went, the more the shadows thickened, until their ship trembled under signals that pulsed like warnings, like a heartbeat growing louder. Their last image, transmitted before everything turned to static, showed the silhouette of a vessel, enormous, angular, and wrong. A design that matched no known species yet carried echoes of human schematics buried in archives that should have been destroyed. When this image appeared on the central screen of the council hall, a heavy silence fell over the rulers, a silence deeper than fear, the silence of recognition, because some of them had seen drawings of those ships in their ancestors' secret texts, drawings they were told never to speak of. Panic erupted, voices clashing, some insisting it was a trick by rival empires seeking to weaken the council, others demanding a full fleet be dispatched to erase whatever lay in that cursed sector. But beneath their words was the unspoken truth none dared admit. If humanity had truly survived, if their fleets were waiting, then the balance of the galaxy was already broken. Outside the chamber, rumors spread faster than light, whispering through trading routes and soldier camps, whispers that the Deathworlders had returned, that the legends mocked for centuries were real, and that soon the sky itself would prove it. Whispers of the vanished explorers spread like wildfire across the galaxy, carried not only by official reports but by smugglers, traders, and frightened soldiers who spoke too freely in shadowed markets. And soon every world was alive with the same hushed question: had the humans truly returned? The Council tried to silence the rumors, declaring the signals nothing more than space distortion, the lost patrols victims of natural collapse zones. Yet their denials only fueled the fire because those who had heard the recordings knew that what echoed through the static was not the random noise of stars dying but the deliberate pulse of intelligence. Citizens gathered in secret, sharing old myths once banned by the Council, songs of human fleets burning across systems, of soldiers who fought even as fire consumed their bodies. And though centuries had passed since Earth was said to be destroyed, the memory of humanity lingered like a scar that refused to heal. On outer rim colonies, unease grew into terror when more ships went missing, vanishing along routes long thought safe, their last messages cut off by the same dreadful static. And in the silence that followed, many believed they could hear something in the darkness, a slow rhythm like the beat of a heart too vast to belong to any single creature, a heart of fleets waiting to awaken. Alien militaries began to whisper among themselves, commanders questioning if their fleets could withstand such an enemy if the myths were true, remembering the old training simulations built upon human war tactics, scenarios so brutal most species failed them repeatedly, and those simulations had been dismissed as exaggerations, yet now they felt like warnings. One admiral, old and scarred, gathered his officers and spoke words that chilled the room. If they are back, then every war we have ever fought was a game compared to what is coming. In the deep void another mystery appeared. Stations abandoned centuries ago flickered to life, automated beacons humming with power that had not burned in generations, and every one of those signals pointed toward the same region, the sector once called Sol. The Council could not hide it any longer. Their citizens demanded answers, and though officials still mocked the notion of humans, their eyes betrayed fear as if they too could feel the weight of something vast pressing against the edges of known space. Then came the final confirmation that the whispers were not empty, for a merchant vessel drifting near the Forbidden Zone captured a single image before its systems shut down. A massive shape gliding silently past the stars, hull dark as obsidian, edges sharp like the weapons of predators, and across its surface glowed markings that matched no empire alive. Yet to those who had studied forbidden archives, those symbols spoke of a name erased from history. The merchant's crew swore the ship never fired, never moved against them, but its silent presence was worse than an attack, because it confirmed the impossible. And when the story reached the galaxy's heart, the people trembled with the knowledge that the forgotten species was no longer forgotten. They were watching, waiting, and perhaps deciding when to strike. The patrol ship that first glimpsed them had not been meant for discovery. It was an old vessel assigned to routine sweeps along quiet lanes where nothing but drifting rock usually appeared. Yet that night the crew sat frozen as the stars themselves vanished behind colossal shadows moving without sound. Ships so large their silhouettes swallowed constellations whole. The captain, a veteran with decades of patrols behind him, felt his chest tighten as scanners flickered in confusion, unable to lock on to the objects that loomed across the void. And though the younger officers whispered nervously about sensor errors, he knew deep in his bones that what they were seeing was no trick of light. The shadows glided slowly, deliberately, and for a single dreadful second the patrol ship drifted close enough to catch sight of a hull etched with lines. Markings that glowed faintly like scars lit from within, symbols that stirred something buried in the captain's memory. He had seen those shapes before in forbidden texts, diagrams that his academy instructors had dismissed as myths, records of ships belonging to the Deathwelders, humans who once carved their defiance into steel. Before his crew could process what they were witnessing, the shadows vanished, slipping back into the black as though swallowed by the night itself, leaving behind only silence and trembling hearts. The captain forced a report to be filed, sending the data straight to the council. But when the images reached the chamber, the ruling voices laughed, their arrogance still unshaken, mocking the old soldier and accusing him of fabrication. Yet beneath their ridicule an unease rippled through them, because no one could deny the raw fear in the captain's voice, fear not of an unknown enemy but of a nightmare recognized. Outside the chamber the story could not be contained. The crew themselves whispered it at ports, telling of ships that moved like predators, of war machines so silent they made the void itself feel alive, and soon colonies far and wide repeated the tale until entire planets buzzed with nervous energy. In back alleys and military barracks, in temples and trading halls, the word spread. The humans were real, their fleets were awake, and they were already here. As the rumors grew, so did unrest. Soldiers questioned their leaders, traders cancelled routes, and civilians prayed to gods both old and new, because all knew what the return of humanity would mean. And though the council still tried to silence the panic with decrees and threats, the truth could not be buried, for even as the rulers argued and mocked, new reports came in from other sectors, patrols swearing they too had seen impossible shadows crossing the stars, shadows shaped like warships that should not exist, and in every retelling the legend grew stronger, feeding the dread that the galaxy's darkest myth was no longer myth at all but a storm gathering just beyond their reach. The council chamber was a storm of voices, every ruler shouting over the other, their words colliding like crashing waves, some demanding immediate fleets be dispatched to erase the threat, others insisting the sightings were lies spread by rival empires to fracture their unity, and beneath the shouting a current of fear pulsed stronger than any argument. A reptilian warlord slammed his clawed hand against the obsidian table and hissed that if humanity had truly returned then no delay could be afforded. Their forces must strike first before the Deathwelders struck them. But across the chamber a feathered elder spoke with trembling restraint, reminding all of the old records that told how aggression against humans never ended in victory, how fleets larger than suns had been shattered by their relentless tactics. The chamber grew hotter, more chaotic, and for the first time in centuries the unity of the council began to splinter, entire factions forming before the debate even ended. Some demanded secrecy, insisting that if their people learned the truth they would descend into panic, while others argued that lies would only fuel rebellion when the humans finally revealed themselves. The oldest species, those who remembered fragments of forbidden history, did not speak loudly but their silence carried more weight than the shouting of dozens. One of them, a scarred elder who had sat in the council for 300 years, finally rose with eyes dark as void and whispered words that sent a chill across the chamber. You do not understand what it means if they are awake. We are not discussing war, we are discussing survival. That sentence cut through the noise, freezing even the boldest voices, because deep inside none of them truly believed they could win if humanity had returned. Outside the chamber the whispers had already spread faster than light. No decree could contain them, and across distant worlds fear turned into preparation. Colonies began stockpiling weapons, smugglers abandoned their routes, even mercenaries refused contracts that led near the forbidden zone. Fleets of the council were quietly ordered to patrol closer to Sol, their commanders nervous as they approached the void that legend said had once been home to Earth. But what none of them realized was that every movement they made, every broadcast they sent, was already being watched. In the darkness beyond their senses, shapes moved with precision, shadows vast and silent. Fleets that did not need to reveal themselves because they had been here all along, waiting, listening, measuring the arrogance of those who once called them extinct. And though no shot had yet been fired, the galaxy had already changed, for the Council, once a symbol of absolute control, now trembled under the weight of a name they had tried to erase: humanity. The fleets sent toward the Sol sector moved with confidence at first, banners raised and weapons charged, their commanders boasting across open channels that they would prove once and for all that humans were nothing more than smoke and shadow. Yet the further they drifted into the dead zone, the quieter those boasts became, until even the most arrogant captains whispered in uneasy tones, for their scanners began to register impossible readings, energy signatures far beyond anything known to the Council, signals that came and went as if mocking their pursuit. At first they thought it was interference from collapsed stars, but then came the moment that silenced every voice. A sudden rupture in the void as if space itself was tearing, and from that wound emerged shapes so vast the stars vanished behind them. One by one they decloaked, engines glowing like captured suns, hulls black as midnight and edged like blades, each ship larger than the proudest dreadnoughts the Council had ever built. In perfect silence they drifted into formation, dozens, then hundreds, until the entire horizon was nothing but human warships arrayed in grim majesty. Panic erupted in the alien fleet, officers shouting conflicting orders, some demanding retreat, others crying for an attack. But before any rash act could be taken, a single transmission cut across every channel. A deep signal so sharp it froze every creature in their seats. The voice was calm, steady, unmistakably human, and though it spoke no threats, the weight of its tone was heavier than any weapon. We have waited long enough. Every ship in the Council's fleet felt the vibration of those words through their hulls, and for the first time in generations, alien soldiers who thought themselves invincible now tasted the sharpness of fear. The human vessels did not fire, they did not advance, they only watched in silence, their weapons dark yet their presence suffocating, a presence that told the galaxy a truth no denial could cover. Humanity had not been destroyed, they had been preparing, building in silence, growing in shadows, and now they had chosen to reveal themselves, not as myth, not as legend, but as the storm waiting to reclaim the stars. Across the galaxy, every screen, every comm channel, every transmission suddenly froze as the human signal broke through with such force that no firewall, no interference field, no encryption could resist it, and in the silence that followed a single voice spoke, calm yet carrying the weight of thunder. The voice of a human commander who addressed not just the fleets before Sol but every world in the Council's reach. And his words were not shouted threats but measured truths that cut deeper than any weapon. We were never gone, the voice declared, every syllable striking like iron against stone. We were watching, we were preparing, and we were waiting for the day you forgot who we are. Across alien cities millions stopped in place, workers dropped tools, soldiers froze mid-drill, rulers sat pale in their thrones. For all of them understood the gravity of that message, and though the voice was calm there was an undertone of warning that could not be ignored. The commander spoke again, reminding the galaxy of what their ancestors once knew, of how humans had fought when outnumbered, of how they had bled but never broken, and of how their enemies had vanished into dust while humanity endured. You mocked us as legends, the voice continued, but legends are born from truth, and truth has returned. Entire planets quaked with the weight of those words, riots breaking out in some cities as citizens demanded their leaders explain the lies they had been told for centuries. Soldiers whispering among themselves if their weapons could even dent the black steel of those colossal warships now blotting the skies. On the Council's own homeworld, a silence more terrifying than chaos filled the chamber as every ruler listened, and some could not meet the gaze of others, for they remembered the secret archives hidden generations ago that spoke of this very moment. Then the final line came, short, sharp, and heavier than anything else. Do not test us. And with that, the signal ended, leaving only static and a galaxy drowning in fear, for those 4 words meant that humanity was offering no negotiation, no plea, only a warning that Defiance would awaken something no empire was prepared to face. The galaxy held its breath in the days that followed the human broadcast, but silence did not last long. For there were always those among the Council who believed arrogance could shield them, who thought humanity's words were nothing but an echo from ghosts wielding outdated power, and so a fleet was dispatched, small compared to the great armadas of old but large enough to send a message, its commanders boasting openly that they would prove to the galaxy that humans were bluffing. They crossed into the Sol sector with banners raised and weapons ready, their soldiers roaring on open channels that they would burn away these shadows of the past. But their laughter turned to dread the moment the void rippled and human ships materialized around them. Not in scattered formations but in precise patterns that spoke of discipline beyond anything the aliens had ever seen. The Council fleet opened fire first, volleys of plasma and beams of starfire lancing across the black. Yet to their horror the human warships did not even return fire immediately. They simply moved, their hulls bending around attacks as if the void itself favored them. And when the first human ship answered it was with a single strike, a lance of energy that cut through 3 battleships in one breath, slicing them open like fragile shells. Panic erupted, commanders screaming, ships colliding as they tried to retreat. But the humans were mercilessly efficient, every strike calculated, every movement measured, as though they had studied their enemies for centuries and knew exactly where to cut. Within minutes half the Council fleet was in ruins, their wreckage burning like dying stars, and the survivors fled in chaos, their last transmissions filled with screams and disbelief, crying that their weapons could not pierce the human armor, that their shields fell like glass before human fire, that they were not fighting myths but predators who had returned sharper than ever. Across the galaxy those transmissions spread faster than the Council could contain, broadcast on black markets, intercepted by smugglers, whispered by soldiers who no longer trusted their leaders, and suddenly the name humanity became not a joke but a terror spoken in every home. On distant colonies people swore they saw shadows in the sky, fleets passing silently above, never firing, never speaking, only watching, and that silence was worse than any battle because it told them the humans chose when to strike, not their enemies. In military academies cadets who had once laughed at the word Earth now stared pale at their instructors, demanding to know why they had been lied to, why the old training scenarios built on human tactics had been mocked when they were the only lessons that might save them now, and the instructors, stripped of confidence, could offer no answers. On the Council's throne world the rulers quarreled in terror, some demanding unconditional surrender, others swearing they must unite their fleets for total war. But none dared send another armada so quickly after the humiliation of Sol, for every commander knew deep in their bones that their ships were nothing but kindling before the storm. Meanwhile the humans remained silent, their warships holding formation in the void, no demands, no speeches, no movement beyond their calculated strikes, as though they wanted the galaxy to tremble, to live in dread of the next attack. It was not just warfare, it was psychological domination, a reminder carved into the stars that humanity had returned not as fragile survivors but as masters of fear. And though the Council tried to silence the truth, tried to cloak the destruction in lies, no voice could smother the terror of millions who had seen the images with their own eyes, human warships darkening the sky, fleets stretching like a wall of night, and all who looked upon them understood the same dreadful truth. The galaxy's balance had shattered, the legend had risen, and humanity was no longer the hunted but the hunters. The Council chambers no longer echoed with arrogance but with desperation. Rulers who once laughed at the very mention of humanity now shouted over one another with fear twisting their voices, some crying for unconditional peace, others demanding the creation of a superfleet to counter the human threat. But every suggestion fell apart because no one trusted the strength of their armies anymore, not after the humiliating defeat that spread across every corner of the galaxy like wildfire. Entire empires were trembling as citizens rioted, screaming that their leaders had lied for centuries, hiding the truth of the Deathworlders, hiding that humanity had never been destroyed, and now the people demanded answers their rulers could not give. The fear was not limited to civilians. Even hardened admirals whispered to their crews that no ship, no formation, no technology the Council possessed could match what they had seen. Tales of human weapons that cut through their strongest shields in a single strike were now repeated as warnings, and the younger officers, once eager for glory, now dreaded the very thought of facing a human fleet. The Council tried to project strength, summoning every empire to the Great Chamber. Their banners raised, their armies called to readiness, but beneath the ceremonial words the silence of dread grew heavier. Then the silence was broken not by rumor but by presence, for into Council-controlled space came a single vessel, vast beyond imagination, a human battleship that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever built, its hull black and gleaming like obsidian, its engines glowing with restrained fury, and its approach was not hurried but steady, deliberate, like a predator walking calmly into the den of prey. No weapons fired, no fleets followed, yet the arrival of that one ship shook the galaxy more than any war ever had, because its very existence was proof that the humans were not only alive but far beyond anything the Council had imagined. It crossed borders without resistance, drifting through defensive lines that once boasted they could hold back armadas, and the alien ships that were meant to intercept it simply held position, paralyzed by the crushing weight of fear, their commanders unwilling to sacrifice their crews against a foe that could not be defeated. On the Council's throne world, millions gathered in the streets, staring upward as the sky darkened with the shadow of the massive vessel. And though it did not fire a single weapon, the air itself seemed to tremble with its presence. Inside the council chamber, rulers sat pale and silent as their defenses reported no chance of victory if they engaged, their own commanders refusing to act, their own fleets unwilling to die in battles they knew they could not win. Then the ship did something more terrifying than an attack. It stopped in orbit, looming over the planet like a reminder that every heartbeat of every leader, every soldier, every citizen now belonged to the humans if they willed it. A transmission followed, but this time it was not a voice to the entire galaxy, only to the rulers themselves, and its message was brief, its words colder than ice: "We have returned to judge." Those 4 words cracked the Council's unity more than any strike ever could, because they revealed a truth more dreadful than war, that humanity did not need to destroy them. Humanity only needed to decide what their fate would be, and the rulers, who once laughed at legends, now sat trembling under the shadow of the fleet they once swore did not exist. The galaxy had always believed itself endless, ruled by empires so vast that no single species could ever rise high enough to challenge them all. But that illusion shattered when the horizon itself turned black, for humanity had revealed the true scope of its power. It began with the single battleship that held the Council's throne world in silence, but soon reports poured in from every sector, fleets of human warships emerging out of nothingness, decloaking from shadows where no scanners had seen them, surrounding suns and stations alike until entire star systems were drowned under their presence. They did not attack at once. They did not need to. Their silence was a weapon sharper than blades, their stillness heavier than bombardments, because the sight of thousands of colossal ships blotting out starlight told the galaxy everything it needed to know. Humanity had prepared in secret, grown in exile, and now returned as masters. Worlds panicked, soldiers deserted, leaders trembled on their thrones, because none could deny the reality written in black steel across the skies. The legends told of human courage, of human fury, of battles fought to the last breath. But what appeared now was more than legend. It was a force so disciplined, so vast, that no empire could even imagine resistance. On the Council's homeworld, the rulers gathered once more, their voices hollow, their pride stripped away, as they looked to the heavens where the human fleet hovered like a wall of night. And none dared give the order to fire, for they knew a single volley from those ships could turn their planet to ash before their words even finished leaving their mouths. And then came the final message, broadcast not in threats but in calm inevitability. A voice that spoke across every star, every station, every world where life listened. "You called us myths," the voice said, steady and sharp. "You erased our name from your history, but history cannot be erased, it only waits. You feared the truth, and now the truth stands before you. We are humanity, we are the Deathworlders, and the age of silence is over." Across the galaxy, billions fell into stunned silence, some falling to their knees in surrender, others weeping in terror, because they knew there was no escape, no defense, only submission or destruction. The skies above countless worlds darkened as fleets moved into formation, blocking out suns and turning daylight into twilight, and in every corner of the galaxy the same dreadful thought consumed every mind: that the forgotten species was forgotten no longer, that the age of council dominance was ended, and that the age of humanity had begun.